A mother's love, a silent prayer, a tale of unshakable faith and karma. Have you ever felt like your prayer just vanished into a void? Some prayers are never spoken aloud. No echoes. No sound. Just trembling breaths crawling through darkness, slipping quietly into the deepest fears of the human soul. Maya prayed like that every night. In a rundown third-floor apartment in the heart of the city where car horns screamed as constant reminders of a hurried life, a mother sat by her son's bed. One hand clutched his tiny fingers, the other pointed to the ceiling. She wasn't asking for a miracle. She just needed a sign that life still had meaning. Maya used to be someone else. A strong, confident woman, well known in the interior design world for her style, minimalist living, deep meaning. But now, she had only one thing left: faith. Not the kind that shouts. Not the kind tied to churches, rituals, or sermons. This was a quiet faith like misty rain no one notices, yet it soaks into the driest layers of a soul. And that's where this story begins. Maya woke up before the sunlight had a chance to slip through the faded curtains. She got up quietly, careful not to wake Liam, her 8-year-old son, who had just fallen asleep after his 5th 4 drip that week. His face was pale and thin, but still carried an innocent glow. Maya gazed at him, holding back a sigh. The tiny apartment had only 2 rooms, one for Liam, the other a kitchen combined with a fold-out bed for Maya. The kitchen was bare. Yesterday, she had spent her last coin on painkillers and a few withered apples. The fridge held nothing but light. She sat at her old desk and opened her laptop. The last email from her company had arrived 3 days ago, cold and final. We regret to inform you that your employment with us is terminated due to lack of commitment. Maya didn't blame them. She had missed 7 meetings, 2 deadlines, and 1 performance review, all because of Liam. She opened her banking app. Balance, $2.14. Rent due in a week. Medical bills, $14,237 and rising. She stood up. A wave of dizziness hit her. Her stomach churned. But Maya didn't fall. She was used to it. For the past 3 months, she had lived like a ghost, existing only to hold back the quiet destruction eating away at Liam's small body. And then, Maya sat down, crossed her legs, placed her hands on her knees. No incense. No chants. No spoken plea. Just an inhale, and an exhale. Please don't let me fall apart before my son gets 1 day without pain. That was a prayer. But no one heard it. Except Maya. A memory pierced through. A hospital waiting room, flickering fluorescent lights. A doctor bowed his head and said quietly, "We've found a malignant tumor in the right lobe. The prognosis isn't good. We're sorry." Maya remembered nothing after that except a wave of coldness flooding her body, her chest tightening until she couldn't breathe. She didn't cry. She just couldn't breathe anymore. Back in the present, Liam stirred awake, looking at his mother with a faint smile. "Mom, are we going to the park today?" Maya smiled, a smile that hurt like a blade. "Of course, sweetheart." Even though it was raining. Even though she had no money left. Even though her legs trembled beneath her. She hugged him and whispered, "As long as you smile, I can fight the whole world." And she prayed again. No one heard. No one answered. But she kept praying. There was no lightning. No warning sign. Sometimes tragedy doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly, like a door slamming shut behind you. That night, at 2:12 a.m., The hospital called. "Ms. Maya, please come immediately. There's been a complication with the chemo. Liam is seizing." Maya didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just grabbed her old sweater, slipped on worn-out shoes, and ran into the freezing rain. The ER was lit like day. Liam lay unconscious, lips purple, machines surrounding him like a web trying to pull him back from the edge. Maya stood still. Everything moved in slow motion. She saw the sweat on the doctor's brow, heard every beep-beep echo like the final heartbeat of hope. A nurse gently touched her shoulder. "We've stabilized the seizure, but he needs close monitoring. Do you have any family with you?" Maya shook her head. Her voice cracked. "No. It's just the two of us." 2 days later, Maya received a formal notice. Eviction due to unpaid rent. She pleaded for more time. They replied with a cold email. "We sympathize, but rules are rules." Maya packed in silence. An old suitcase, a few clothes, Liam's medicine, and the plush dinosaur pillow he clutched every night. Everything she called life now fit into a discarded shopping cart. They moved into a temporary shelter near the hospital. A moldy shared room with stained walls and 2 metal beds. Across from them, an elderly woman reeking of alcohol coughed violently through the night. Liam looked at her. "Mom, where's our home?" Maya smiled. That same smile cracking a little more each day. "We're on an adventure, remember? Like the movies you love. New places, challenges, but the brave ones always find the light." Liam nodded and fell asleep. Maya turned to face the wall, biting her lip to keep from sobbing. The days that followed brought crisis after crisis. The tumor had spread to his spine. Treatment couldn't continue without a 30% prepayment. Old friends stopped replying. Maya sold her phone. Then her laptop. Then her rusted wedding ring, the only thing left from her husband, who died in a car crash 5 years ago. Each time she sold something, it felt like slicing off a piece of herself. But she refused to stop. Every night, in the corner of that room, after Liam had fallen asleep, she sat, hugging her knees, eyes tightly shut. She prayed. "I don't ask for much. Just give me enough strength to make it through one more day." No angel replied. No divine light lit the ceiling. But Maya kept repeating the prayer like a survival ritual. One night, heavy rain poured in. Water dripped from the ceiling, soaking Liam's blanket. Maya covered him with her own body. Rain lashed her back. She trembled but never loosened her grip. In the dark, Liam whispered, "Mom, you really are a superhero." Maya broke down in tears for the first time in months. Not from pain. Not from despair. But because in that moment, she knew. Prayer doesn't need an answer. It just needs to go on. The next morning, Maya awoke feeling nothing. No fear. No hope. No anger. Just a vast blankness, like her soul had been hollowed out. Liam still slept. Maya got dressed and stepped outside for the first time in days. She didn't know why her feet led her to a small alley behind the hospital. Tucked between 2 old buildings was a tiny Buddhist temple. The wooden door was slightly ajar. Incense floated gently in the morning air. She stood there for a moment, unsure. Then stepped inside. Inside, there was only silence. No murmured prayers. No haunting imagery. Just stillness so deep it pulled Maya's thoughts into the void. An elderly nun slowly emerged from the back. Her steps were measured. her face lined with age, but her eyes glowed with calm light. "Welcome, child." Her voice was like wind skimming across water. Maya bowed slightly. "I don't know why I'm here." The nun smiled and said nothing. She simply pointed to a meditation cushion and tapped it gently. "Sit down. No need to speak. Just breathe." Maya sat, hands resting loosely on her knees. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't bracing herself, wasn't enduring. She just breathed. Inhale, feeling her chest expand. Exhale, sensing her breath dissolve into the air. A thought flickered across her mind. But what about Liam? What am I even doing here? Who has time to just breathe? And yet, the thoughts began to fade. After nearly an hour, the nun finally spoke. "Sometimes, the greatest prayer is silence." Maya looked up, eyes glistening. "I've been praying every night, but nothing has changed." The nun nodded gently. Prayer isn't meant to change the world outside. It's meant to change the one who's praying. That sentence struck Maya like a tiny needle, painless, but impossible to remove. They spoke the rest of the morning. About the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its cause, its end, and the path. About impermanence, that nothing lasts forever. About non-self, that the ego is an illusion. And about compassion, loving without condition, even when there's no return. The nun shared a short story. Long ago, a mother lost her 3 children to illness. She begged the Buddha to bring them back. He told her to find a mustard seed from a house that had never lost anyone. She searched far and wide, but found none. And finally, she understood, suffering is part of life. It can't be avoided. Only walked through with mindfulness. Maya didn't respond. But something had quietly risen within her, something strange and real. Before she left the temple, the nun handed Maya a small paper. "Each morning, just sit for 5 minutes. Breathe. And silently repeat this phrase. I do not pray for an easy life. I pray for the strength to walk through every trial." That night, Maya didn't pray as usual. She meditated. Just quiet presence in the dark, beside her son. Her breathing steady. Her heart no longer begging for an outcome. Only holding a quiet faith that whatever came, she would be strong enough to face it. And for the first time in months, Maya slept without nightmares. 7 days. 7 days since her first meditation brought stillness back to her heart. Every morning, she practiced 5 minutes, sometimes 10 depending on whether Liam woke in pain during the night. But on the 8th day, it all collapsed like a building whose foundation had been pulled out. The seizures returned. Worse than before. Liam's little body arched and convulsed like a drawn bowstring. Doctors rushed in. Nurses called for the ventilator. Maya stood frozen in the corner, hands clenched so tight they turned purple. "We'll do our best," one doctor said hesitantly. "But if he doesn't respond to this final treatment..." He didn't need to finish. She understood. That night, Maya couldn't meditate. She sat as usual, but each time she closed her eyes, visions of Liam shaking came flooding in like a storm. The whir of machines. The irregular beeping. The scream in her mind that no one else could hear. "Why? I prayed. I've lived kindly. I've never complained. I've meditated. I've let go. So why?" She bit her lip until it bled. Then screamed silently into the void. "What's the point of faith if my child is still suffering?" The nun was sweeping leaves. Maya walked in, eyes swollen red. She didn't greet her. Didn't speak. She just stood there, eyes brimming with a silent scream, "Why?" The nun set down her broom and stepped closer, gazing deeply into her. "Do you believe prayer is a free pass out of suffering?" Maya stayed silent. "You've meditated. But you haven't accepted. You prayed. But your heart still demands. That's not surrender. That's bargaining." Maya broke down, sobbing like a child. "Then what should I do? I can't take any more. If Liam dies, I'll die too." The nun grasped her hand, thin, cold, but firm. "No one loves you more than the Buddha. But even the Buddha cannot stop death. He only teaches us how not to die in suffering." That night, Maya didn't pray. Didn't meditate. Didn't chant. Didn't think about impermanence. She just held her son tight, like she could anchor his soul from drifting away. Her tears fell freely, not from panic, but from the raw truth she could no longer deny. She might lose Liam. And nothing, no one could stop that. No more pleading. No more deals with fate. Only one thing remained: unconditional love. Maya no longer prayed, "Let my son live." She now prayed for the strength to love him fully, whether he stayed or had to go. The next morning, Maya opened her eyes. Liam was awake. His face flushed from fever, but smiling. "Mom, I dreamed you were holding me in the ocean. The water got so high, but you never let go." Maya said nothing. She only nodded and held him close. This time, her hands didn't tremble. That day, it rained. The kind of cold, unrelenting early winter rain that carries the sorrow of those too familiar with loss. Maya sat in the hospital corridor, a cold cup of tea in hand. Liam had just fallen asleep again after a long fever. The doctors said his condition was stable for now. Stable, a word as fragile as a thread hanging between life and death. Maya didn't meditate. Didn't pray. She just sat. For the first time in months, her mind was truly empty. No questions. No trying to understand. She just sat like a stone beneath the rain. A nurse approached and handed her an envelope. "Someone left this for you." No name. Maya opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper, the handwriting neat and faded. "Thank you. I was planning to end my life. But one day, I saw you holding that sick child, your face fearless. I don't know who you are. But that day, I stopped. I went home. You never said a word, but your silence saved me. I pray you get one more peaceful day." No name. No return address. Just a single dot at the bottom. Maya read it again. And again. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from a wave of emotion too big for words. She didn't remember seeing anyone that day. Didn't know anyone was watching. But in a world that felt like it had turned its back, someone had seen her. That afternoon, Liam woke up. He wanted to draw. Maya rummaged through her bag, found a few stubby pencils and a piece of paper. Liam drew a tree with a mother and child beneath it, holding balloons. Under the picture, he wrote, "Mom is my shelter." Maya held the drawing to her chest like it was her own sacred scripture. By evening, a doctor called her over. His voice was a mix of disbelief and caution. "Liam is responding unexpectedly to the treatment. We can't say it's long-term progress yet, but, for now, he's significantly better. We can't fully explain it. Maybe a rare natural recovery phase." Maya didn't ask questions. She simply nodded. In her heart, it didn't feel like a miracle. Just a small reward for enduring. A gentle brush from fate whispering, "You're on the right path." That night, Maya sat beside her son. Eyes closed. No formal meditation. No ritual prayer. Just a quiet thought. Thank you, for today. No more. No requests. No bargains. Only gratitude, pure, unconditional gratitude. Later that night, her phone rang. Unknown number. A calm, respectful male voice on the other end. "Ms. Maya. I'm the director of a charity foundation. Someone sent us your story. We're looking to support families with severely ill children. If you agree, we'd like to fully cover Liam's medical expenses." Maya said nothing. The man paused, then added, "Someone else told your story for you. And it moved us." She placed the phone on the table, covered her face with both hands, and wept. But this time not from sorrow. From release. Something karma, compassion, or simple human kindness had returned a piece of hope to her. She hadn't sought help. But her silence, her unspoken prayer, had reached someone. Maya lay beside her son, heart as still as a lake after rain. A quiet thought passed through her. Maybe prayer doesn't create miracles. But it opens doors, in other people's hearts. And sometimes, those people become the miracle. That hospital room was unusually quiet that day. Liam slept deeply, his breathing steady, his cheeks rosy again like any other child. Maya sat silently by the window, the golden hue of sunset washing over the city like a fine dusting of light over faded memories. Her fingers gently gripped the letter from the stranger, then she placed it softly on the table. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. The words were already etched into her heart like an indelible mark. Something stirred within Maya, a longing to unearth something that had lain dormant too long. Something she had buried beneath the mask of the strong mother and the enduring woman. She searched through her old backpack. Amid the messy pile of documents, she found a thin, yellowed envelope, fraying at the edges. Inside was a letter nearly 20 years old, written in the shaky handwriting of a 17-year-old girl. "Mom, please, don't make me give it up. I know I'm young. I know I have nothing. But I can feel it living inside me. And I love it. Even though I've never heard it cry. You said, if you have that baby, your life is over. But you didn't know. When I agreed to sign those papers, a part of me died, too." Maya placed the letter down. Her chest tightened. Each heartbeat echoed like a warning drum of an emotional storm on the rise. She had another child. Before Liam. A child she never met. At 17, Maya had gotten pregnant by her classmate. When her parents found out, their fury exploded like thunder. She was forced to leave school. Sent to a young women's counseling center. There, a social worker presented two options: terminate the pregnancy, or give birth and sign an adoption agreement. Maya, then just a terrified girl, too young to vote, chose the less painful route. Less painful for everyone else. But for her, it became a wound that never healed. From the moment she signed that paper, she stopped feeling like herself. Stopped believing she was worthy of love or forgiveness. Maya believed life was punishing her. Punishing her for giving up that child. For not fighting harder. Everything that followed the loss of her husband, Liam's illness, poverty, loneliness, she accepted it all as deserved retribution. And all those silent prayers she whispered over the years. They were never for blessings. They were acts of penance. A confession no one heard. No one judged. But no one forgave either. She began to write a new letter. Not to send, just to write. My child, I'm sorry. Not for letting you go, but for not having the courage to believe I could keep you. I don't know where you are. I haven't dared to look. I'm afraid. If you're happy, I might disrupt your peace. If you're hurting, I might not survive it. I just want you to know, if there was ever a moment you felt unwanted, please believe, someone out there spent a lifetime praying in silence for your peace. She folded the letter, slipped it into her coat pocket like a private talisman. Not for others to see. Not for anyone to know. But for the first time, Maya felt something loosen inside her. Like someone had finally untied the last knot in her soul. Not everyone gets forgiveness. But sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need anyone's permission. All it needs is the courage to say, I was wrong. But I still deserve to live. And that night, for the first time in years, Maya prayed for herself. Not for redemption. Not for reward. Just for forgiveness. Since that night, something in Maya had changed. It wasn't resignation. It wasn't fragile hope she had to hold together with trembling hands. It was something deeper, a quiet stillness, like a lake no longer stirred by wind, even if the skies above remained gray. Liam began to recover. He was still weak, still tired after each round of treatment, but the light had returned to his eyes. He wanted to draw again. Asked about superheroes, the park, and why she still hadn't shaved her head like the nun. Maya laughed for the first time in months, without forcing it. When the doctor announced Liam was strong enough for temporary discharge, Maya didn't cry like other mothers. She simply bowed in thanks, then walked her son home hand in hand like two warriors leaving a battlefield. That evening, as Liam slept, Maya thought of the other mothers she'd seen in the hospital hallway. Crying silently behind masks. Clutching heavy test results. Begging for charity support. Sleeping upright for 3 months just to stay near their child's bed. She knew each of those women was praying in silence just like she once had. And then she wondered. What if they knew someone had been through it and survived? Would they feel less alone? The next day, she asked the hospital's head nurse. Could I talk to the other moms? Just to let them know, they're not alone. From that small idea, a group slowly formed in the hospital's community room. They called themselves Silent Prayers. It started with 3. Then 6. Then 9. No preaching. No advice. Just a circle of mothers, sharing stories about their children, their fears, their paused dreams, unworn wedding dresses, or the sound of a child's laugh they feared would soon fade. Sometimes they just sat. Silent. Holding hands. That was a prayer too. Maya wasn't a leader. She simply listened. But because she was the first to say, I once didn't believe in tomorrow, others began to say, I'm scared. I'm tired. I feel like I failed. One day, a new mother joined, messy hair, sunken eyes, raspy voice. I saw a video of you, talking about your son, and about faith that asks for nothing. I didn't understand all of it. But for the first time, I thought, maybe I'm not the terrible mom I believed I was. Maya froze. She hadn't known the video was online. Someone from the group had filmed it and uploaded it with the title, The Power of Silence, a mother talks about the invisible miracle. Over 100,000 views. The comments overflowed. I needed this. I don't feel crazy anymore. I've never dared to pray, now I will. Thank you for saying what no one else would. Maya read each line. Not with pride. Not with shame. Just stillness. Like a small candle that had unknowingly lit up a dark room, never realizing it could burn. That night, after the group meeting, she tidied up her little corner in the boarding house. She placed a small picture of Liam next to a white candle. No Buddha statue. No cross. No God. Just light. And gratitude. She sat down, hands resting on her knees, and whispered, "Today I ask for nothing. I just want to say thank you for letting me be here, to hear, to be seen, and to become a place where someone finds themselves." And Maya understood. Sometimes prayer isn't meant to change destiny. It's meant to help someone stand tall within their destiny. Spring came early. Tiny buds pushed through cracks in the concrete paths around the hospital. Maya and Liam sat on a stone bench in a small garden behind the building, a quiet place she'd discovered on a walk. Liam was absorbed in coloring his sketchbook. Maya sat beside him, hands on her lap, eyes gently closed. Not deep meditation. Just presence. Mornings like these became their rhythm. No structure. No pressure. Just a daily meeting with herself beneath gentle sunlight, within the rustle of leaves. One day, the nun from the little temple stopped by. She sat beside Maya without a word for 15 minutes. Then stood to leave and said only, "You've learned how to sit in stillness. That's the first step to hearing the real world." Maya bowed. There were no words for what had changed inside her. Before, meditation was an effort, a fight to hold off panic, to stop from falling apart. Now, it wasn't something to do. It was how she lived. Every morning, she sat beside Liam. When he drew, she breathed. When he was quiet, she didn't rush to fill the silence. When he was tired, she just held his hand and breathed in sync with him. And the strange thing was, Liam felt it too. One day, he asked, "Mom, why do you always close your eyes?" She smiled. "Because I want to see more clearly." Liam thought for a moment, then imitated her. He crossed his legs, placed his hands on his knees, and closed his eyes. Then opened them. "I didn't see anything, but I could hear the birds really well." Maya nodded. "That means, you're meditating already." During a silent prayers group session, Maya finally spoke about meditation as a tool. Not to escape pain, but to stay with it safely. She said, "Many people pray to move past suffering. But for me, prayer means staying. Staying with this moment. With the child I'm holding. With the breath. With life itself." No one objected. No one doubted. They simply sat in silence. Then one by one, they nodded. Maybe no one had ever invited them to stay with fear before. But now, it felt possible if someone else was there with them. A month later, Maya held an outdoor meditation session. Just sitting together beneath a large tree in the park. No speeches. No slogans. No inspirational quotes. They sat. The first 10 minutes were awkward. Then gradually, there was only wind. And breath. Afterward, a timid mother approached Maya and asked, "Do you think, if I meditate long enough, my child will get better?" Maya didn't answer right away. She looked gently at the woman and said, "I don't know. But I believe, if you sit long enough, you'll learn how to love your child fully, whether they heal or not. The woman broke into tears. And Maya knew. Prayer doesn't live in the mouth or in the mind. It lives in the way we show up for someone completely, in this moment. That night, Maya and Liam sat by the window together. The sky sparkled with stars. Liam leaned his head on her shoulder and asked softly, "Mom, do you think someone up there hears us talking?" Maya answered without hesitation. "Yes. But not to do anything. Just to know. You are alive. And you are loved." The news came on a summer morning, while Maya was making tea and Liam was rummaging through the last of the cookies from their park trip the day before. The phone rang. It was the hospital. Maya frowned slightly, then answered. "Ms. Maya. I'm sorry to share this over the phone," the doctor began hesitantly. "We just received the latest MRI results. Liam's tumor has returned. Quickly. Very quickly. There was no wind. No thunder. But the room turned cold." Maya set the phone down gently, as if afraid to wake a monster that had just opened its eyes. Liam was still chewing on cookies, crumbs on his mouth, giggling. She looked at him. Her heart clenched but didn't break. Not like the first time. No panic. No why. Just a deep silence like a well long used to holding back tears. She called Liam over and held him tightly. No tears. No promises. Just a hug longer than usual. A few days later, Liam was readmitted. The doctors discussed aggressive treatment options. But their eyes said everything. This was the final battle. Maya didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't search for second opinions. She didn't fight anymore. She accepted it. Not as defeat, but as a kind of quiet victory no book ever teaches. The strength to accept the unchangeable, with full-hearted love. Each day, Maya stayed by Liam's side, never leaving for a moment. She read to him, drew pictures with him, sang songs, meditated together, laughed when they could, and stayed silent when they couldn't. One night, Liam asked, "Mom, if I'm not here anymore, will you be really sad?" Maya squeezed his hand. "I'll miss you every single day. So, you'll be sad?" She thought for a while. "Yes. But I won't suffer." "Why not?" "Because suffering comes when we resist the truth. Remember when you said I was a superhero?" "Yeah, I remember. Superheroes don't escape pain. But they don't run from it either." Liam smiled. Then, in a voice as light as breath, he whispered, "I dreamed I was flying, and you were on the ground waving at me, but you weren't crying." Maya nodded. She didn't dare say more. That was the last night. The next morning, Liam didn't wake up. Maya held him for a long time. She didn't call the doctor. She didn't scream. She didn't drop to her knees and beg. There was only breath, her own steady and calm, as if soothing his little soul to sleep. In that moment, Maya saw clearly. Nothing is truly lost. Only changed. Only transformed. Liam had flown, just as he said. And she prayed. Not for him to return. Not to be comforted. But simply to say, "Thank you, for choosing me to be your shelter even if only for a short while." Liam's funeral had no black clothes. No funeral flowers. No anguished wailing. Maya didn't want any of that. Instead, she set a small wooden table in the park where she and Liam used to draw. On it sat a photo of Liam smiling, holding a blue balloon beside a box of colored pencils and a stack of blank paper. Everyone who came was given one sheet of paper. Draw the last thing that made you smile. No one was required to speak. No long speeches. No microphones. Just the wind. And the sound of pencils sliding across paper. By the end, the table was covered with drawings. A child's smile. A warm bowl of rice. A loved one's eyes. Hands holding in the rain. Maya stood silently, like a gardener planting seeds, not knowing when or if they would bloom. Weeks later, a non-profit focused on children's mental health reached out. Someone from the Silent Prayers group had shared Maya's story and the old video of her speaking. This time, it didn't just circulate in a small community. It spread across forums, was quoted in articles, and even integrated into mental health support programs for patients and parents. Maya didn't have social media. She didn't track views, shares, or comments. But one day, a young woman found her at the hospital. Petite, cropped hair, holding a newborn baby. "I almost gave up this child," she said, voice trembling. "But one night, I heard your words. No one prays in vain. Sometimes, the prayer becomes a miracle for someone else, not for yourself. And I stopped." She wept. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. Maya didn't cry. She simply nodded and said quietly, "Thank you, for showing me that my prayer didn't disappear into nothing." A magazine invited Maya to write an essay. A TV show requested an interview. A TEDx conference asked her to be the keynote speaker. She declined them all. Until one day, the elderly nun, the one who had guided her through her first inner storm, called. "Do you know why the bell in the temple rings so long? Because it's struck with just the right force, not too hard to hurt, not too soft to vanish. Your voice is that bell." 3 months later, Maya stepped onto the TEDx stage. No headset mic. No PowerPoint. Just a woman in a simple white blouse, holding an old sheet of paper, Liam's drawing. She said, "I'm not here to tell a sad story. I'm here to talk about the power of presence. Being present with your child, even in pain. Being present with yourself, even when you feel broken. Being present in every prayer, even when no one answers. I once prayed for my son to live. Then I learned to pray so I could love him, even if he had to go. Now, I don't ask for anything anymore. I pray with my life itself." The hall was silent. Then, it overflowed. Not with applause, but with quiet tears. Like the silent prayers that had never been spoken aloud. Maya returned to her small boarding room on a gentle rainy afternoon. The wooden desk where she had once written a letter to her first daughter was still there, beside the window. A light layer of dust reminded her, she hadn't touched that part of her past in a long time. The TEDx talk had gone viral. Emails, letters, messages poured in from everywhere. People called her the mother of silence, a light in the darkness, the survivor of unspoken truths. But Maya didn't feel like anything. After everything, she just felt empty. She sat by the desk, gazing at the wall where Liam's picture once hung. The frame was gone. But the nail remained a quiet witness. That night, she opened her old journal. Lines written in despair. Prayers soaked in tears. Self-blame repeated like a funeral hymn. I wasn't good enough. I don't deserve to be a mother. I must suffer to make up for my sins. But now, Those words didn't make her cry. They startled her. She realized she had carried not only grief, but a lifelong self-imposed sentence. For years, Maya hadn't lived as a person. She had lived as a punishment with skin. She looked out at the rain. The nun's voice returned to her mind. No sinner must carry suffering forever, except the one who refuses to forgive herself. Maya laughed. Softly, but with sorrow. She had forgiven the world. Forgiven life. Forgiven death. But never herself. She closed her eyes. Inhaled. And for the first time, spoke to herself. Not with words, but with presence. I'm sorry. For letting you live in regret too long. For making you believe your love was not enough. For thinking pain was the price of being a good person. She opened her eyes. The rain still fell. But inside her, another storm had passed. She took out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a single sentence. I am no longer my pain. The next day, Maya visited the temple. The elderly nun, her hair now completely white, was waiting in the courtyard. No need for many words. They simply sat. Silent. In the drizzle. After a long while, the nun asked, "What do you see?" Maya answered, "I see that I am here." "And who are you?" She thought for a long time. Then smiled. "I am the one who is breathing." That day, it didn't rain. For the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. Soft sunlight poured through the small hospital window where Liam lay. Maya sat beside his bed. No books. No writing. No meditation. She just sat there, eyes open, heart open. As if trying to soak in every second the universe still granted her and her son. Liam was very weak now. The doctors had already said it. A few days left. Maybe just a few hours. But Maya wasn't afraid. She had cried. She had prayed. She had rebelled. She had accepted. Now, all she wanted was to be present. Liam opened his eyes barely. He reached out and gently touched her hand. "Mom, can you tell me about the last bird we saw in the park?" Maya smiled. She leaned close and whispered in his ear. "Do you remember? It was a little brown sparrow, perched on a bare branch. At first, I thought it was hurt. But then it took off straight into the sky. And I thought, maybe it wasn't afraid. Because it knew, the sky was always ready to receive it." Liam exhaled softly. His eyes closed. "I'll fly like that too, right, Mom?" Maya gently squeezed his hand and kissed his forehead. "Fly, my love. I won't hold you back. I'll be right here. Just like I promised." And the little boy, like a leaf slipping from a branch without a sound, let go. No pain. No struggle. Just one final breath, light as wind. Maya didn't cry. She placed her hand over his chest, closed her eyes, and silently recited, "Namo Amitabha Buddha." 3 times. Peace. No alarms. No machines screaming. No shouts. Only sunlight slowly spilling into the room. A dawn more tender than any morning she had ever known. She opened the window. Let the light touch him. Not to send him off, but to welcome him into a new form of being. Maya sat like that for a long time. Her hand holding the one that no longer belonged to this world. She didn't feel emptiness. She felt vastness. As if her heart had just opened into a sky. One no longer defined by life or death. In that moment, Maya understood something she had heard for years but had never truly touched. No birth. No death. No coming. No going. No before. No after. No more. No less. Only transformation. The next day, when they came to take Liam's body, Maya followed behind. Her head unbowed. Her eyes dry. She placed one thing in her son's hand. The old drawing. The tree, the mother, the child holding a balloon. And she whispered, "If someday, somewhere, you need to find me, just follow the string. I'm still holding the other end." A large auditorium. The signature red lights of TEDx. A stage wrapped in black carpet. A single round platform at the center. No dramatic lighting. No emotional music. No slideshow. Maya walked onto the stage. Her hair now short. Wearing a plain white shirt and dark trousers. No makeup. No effort to hide her age. Just an ordinary woman. But as she stood at center stage, the room fell completely silent. She held the microphone. Looked down at the audience. She didn't rush to speak. No gripping opening line. Just one deep breath. And then, she began. "I used to believe, if I tried hard enough, my child would live. If I prayed hard enough, with enough sincerity, the miracle would come. But my son Liam still passed away." She paused. No one moved. "I've learned that prayer is not to change the outcome. It is to allow us to meet the truth without a shattered heart. I'm not here to talk about miracles. I'm here to speak of another kind of strength. The strength of a mother who sits in the dark and still chooses to love." Someone in the audience wiped away tears. Maya continued. Her voice steady. But every word flowed straight through the listeners' hearts. "I never prayed for my son to live forever. I only prayed for enough peace to hold him tightly. Even through the pain. Even through his final breath." Behind her, the screen lit up. Not with Liam's photo, but with the drawing. The tree. The mother. The child holding a balloon. "My son has flown. But I still hold the other end of the string. Not to pull him back, but to remind myself. Love doesn't end when life does. Love is an action. It's being present." She looked at the audience. No longer a sea of strangers. She knew each person there carried a loss. A fear they had yet to name. A child within them they never fully held. A forgiveness never spoken. You don't have to be a mother. You don't have to have lost someone. You just need to have felt your heart break. Even once. And if you've ever felt that, then know this. You are not alone. A long silence. Then Maya smiled. A smile soft as morning mist, but vast as a universe healed. "I once prayed in desperation. Now, I pray through presence. No reply needed. No reward expected. Just to be here. And to love. No climactic music. Just silence falling over the room like warm rain. Soaking deep into the bone." Then, the audience rose. Not all at once. One by one. As if each had understood something no words could explain. And Maya, walking off stage, didn't feel like an inspiration. Didn't feel like a survivor. She just knew. She had said what needed to be said. For those who needed to hear it. Maya returned to the small monastery where she had first arrived during the darkest days of her life. The old wooden gate was still there, unpainted, unchanged, only now covered in a thicker layer of moss, and the scent of incense still gently lingered in the air. The elderly nun sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Her body smaller now, her hair nearly all white, but her eyes remained clear like the source of a mountain spring. When Maya stepped into the courtyard, the nun looked up softly. She didn't say a word. They sat beside each other. No greetings. No explanations. Everything was already present in their being together. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Maya knelt before her. She didn't say, "I want to ordain." She didn't make grand vows. She only whispered, "I have nowhere else to return except here. And nothing left to hold on to except a peaceful heart." The nun nodded. "If you've released both suffering and hope, then you are ready." Maya was welcomed into the monastery as a lay practitioner. She didn't change her name. No formal initiation. No pictures in the paper. Just a simple brown robe and a shaved head the following morning. As sunlight filtered through the monastery leaves, when the final strands of hair fell, Maya didn't cry. She touched her bare scalp and smiled gently. "I have nothing left to hide." The days that followed were quiet. Maya cooked in the monastery kitchen, swept leaves, walked mindfully with the Sangha, taught local children to read, and in the evenings, sat beneath the eaves writing words meant for no one. It rained today. A single drop landed on my hand. I no longer see it as water. I see it as a message from the earth and sky. Everything leaves so that it may return in a new form. One day, the elderly nun called for Maya. She was lying on a low wooden bed, her body now small as a child's. "It's almost my turn. I'm not sad. Not regretful. You stay, take care of those still lost in this world." Maya bowed her head. Her eyes didn't cry, but her heart folded inward like a lotus gently closing. She held the nun's hand light and cold, slowly withdrawing from this world. "I used to fear death because I thought it was the end. Now I know, it's just a return." The nun smiled faintly. "Then you've understood. There's nothing left to teach." She closed her eyes. Maya sat beside her, reciting the Buddha's name. Her voice didn't shake. Her breath didn't falter. Outside, it began to rain. The scent of incense drifted, blending with the wind, the breath of the earth, and a silence that overflowed. After the cremation ceremony, Maya told no one that the nun had saved her life. It wasn't necessary. Everyone there already knew. The one who saved her was herself under the light of a wise teacher. From then on, Maya lived at the monastery. No one remembered she had once stood on a TEDx stage. No one knew she had a son named Liam. No one called her a great mother. Only the village children had a name for her. The nun with the kind smile. "I used to hate my birth mother. I never met her. Never saw her face. The only trace of her in my foster file was a faded line. Mother declined to keep the child. Signed adoption papers. Left no information. As a child, I imagined her as heartless. Selfish. Weak. I once swore, if I ever met her, I would look her in the eye and ask why. I grew up in the system. 4 foster homes. The last was an elderly couple with no children. They didn't speak much, but they gave me enough calm to not collapse. Then, one night, I couldn't sleep, overwhelmed by an unnamed depression. I opened YouTube, searching for any video that could make me feel less empty. I don't remember how I clicked it, but I remember the woman. Sitting on a red stage. Short hair. Peaceful eyes. Her voice soft like a mountain spring, but something in it held me captive. I once begged for my son to live. Now I pray through presence. I cried. I didn't know why. And when the screen showed the final image, a drawing of a tree, a mother, a child holding a balloon, I knew. Not in my mind. In something deeper than blood. She was my mother. No one told me. There was no proof. But I knew. I quietly traveled to the monastery where she now practiced. I didn't ask to see her. I brought no documents. I just wanted to see her once. That day, she was sitting under the eaves, beside the Bodhi tree, fingering prayer beads. Her face peaceful, as if every storm in her life had passed. I stood at a distance, watching her for a long time. She didn't look at me. Maybe she didn't know who I was. Or, maybe she did. We didn't speak. I turned to leave, walking slowly. But as I neared the gate, I heard her voice soft, like wind through leaves. If you've ever felt abandoned, then know this. Someone has prayed for you. With the rest of her life. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Because I understood. I was forgiven. And I had forgiven her. The circle closed. No drama. No tears. Just a quiet contact between two once broken souls. Now reunited in absolute stillness. And if you're still reading. If you've ever whispered a prayer no one seemed to hear. If you've ever lost something that can't be replaced. If you've ever thought you'd gone too far to be forgiven. Then believe this. Your silence is also a voice. And one day, someone will hear it. Comment under this video with a number. 1 if you've ever prayed in desperation. 2 if a woman's quiet presence once saved you. 3 if you believe silence can change the world. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who may need it. Somewhere out there, someone might be waiting for you, just like I once was. The story ends. But the silence still echoes. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share. What did this story teach you? How might it shape the way you live or forgive? Your voice matters. Reading your reflections brings strength, healing, and inspiration to us all. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us create more stories that awaken the soul. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you in the next video.